My boss hired two interns to replace me and asked me to train them after they were planning to fire me. I'm going to start out by saying that English is not my first language, and I wasn't sure that this story belongs here, as this is my first time posting. I used to work in media intelligence, which is a really niche market in the country that I am from. I started as an assistant and learned everything from scratch as I switched from the hospitality industry. Pretty big step, I know. I was eager to learn and was really interested in what they do, as I was trying to get into media back then. First of all, as I learned everything from scratch, I got really good at what I do after just 6 months working there. I was in a three-person team, and I had one of the best bosses and a rally good colleague, which were veterans in the industry. Both of them helped me a lot to get me where I am then. They left the company after just a year there as upper management was just plain hot garbage. The company had four changes in direction within a year, and it was stressing my team out. They did ask me to leave with them, but with me being young and naive trying to prove myself, I declined. The story after my boss and colleague left, it was just me and my team, and I was in charge of a few markets. I was asked to be on call for technical support and was not offered anything in return. At the time, I was pissed, but also trying to prove myself, I obliged. I got really stressed out from working 13 hours a day for a few months at that point, and I kept asking my manager to hire more people as I can't be working like this and it's stressing me out. My manager went on and on saying they don't have the budget for it, so I just forgot about it, drowning myself in work. One day, the CEO of the company came and we had dinner, as he was growing close to me since I was the only one person left who actually know the in and out of the old and new system that the company used. Keep in mind, this CEO is a cheapskate and will try all and every way to suck you dry. He asked me what I wanted to change in the company during dinner, so I started with asking for two new hires for my team, where he gave me the same answer as my manager. So I asked him for a promotion and a raise, which was also declined, saying, "You don't have the necessary experience yet." I was pissed. As a normal person would expect after working 13-hour days for months, you would need rest. I had almost 3 weeks of PTO saved, and I needed the rest. The manager threatened to fire me if I took any PTO as no one was able to do what I did. I took the PTO anyways, I got well rested, and all was good until I came back. There were two new faces, and I was pretty confused, so I asked my manager who were they, and she told me they were my replacements. She told me my notice was 2 months, and I had to train them before I leave. She couldn't do anything, as I was the only one in the company who knew how to run the legacy and the new systems. So realistically, she couldn't say that I was not training them properly as she didn't know how things work. Here's the part where the malicious compliance happens, since the manager did not know how things work. She told me to train the interns on the legacy systems to know better on how the company was built up, and I did just that. She told me strictly to just train the interns on the legacy, and she will be dealing with the rest. Sure, I'll do just that. It was until my last week when the shit really hit the fan. My manager found out that I have been only giving training on the legacy system, and I didn't give them my notes with tips on how to run the system that needed to be used for daily operations. My manager called in the CEO and the managing director to hold a meeting with me, asking me why I hadn't trained my replacements properly. I just told them I did what my manager told me to, which the manager denied, until I forwarded the CEO and MD the email that my manager has sent me, which the call promptly ending. After I left the company, I was patiently waiting for the call that was bound to come. It was my manager. She demanded me to get back to work and said that the firing was just a prank, blah, blah, blah. I told them, pay me triple my wage, and I'll consider it. They called me crazy and ended the call. It's been 2 months since that call, and based on a good friend from another department, my old manager's neck deep in this shit show. Now, TLDR, fire me from taking PTO, get fucked. Edit. Thank you for the kind and nice comments. And to those who think I'm making this up, you're entitled to have your opinion, but fuck you. Edit 2. So I've gotten into contact with my ex-colleagues. My ex-manager is now exploring greener pastures, and the two interns quit after a bit. The company had to scrap the new system where they spent a lot developing, and then had to buy out another company specializing in system development and maintenance, which costed them $12 million. Guess who'd be able to run their systems cheaper? Wink. Wink. Teacher wouldn't listen, so the entire class complied, and he got fired TLDR at bottom. This happened in the early 2000s in my junior year of high school. The district had just built the third high school in our city, and most of the teachers were new. The band director was one of those new hires. He was qualified for the job, but had zero people skills and was extremely abrasive towards students. He had previously taught university and could not wrap his head around the fact that high school students are not college-level music majors who live in practice rooms and write symphonies in their sleep. His normal behavior consisted of berating students for not knowing university-level curriculum, talking down to everyone about how he can't understand why they were so incompetent, and stopping rehearsals to go on long tangents about things that had nothing to do with music. Every day, at least 2 to 3 students would leave class in tears. We complained to the higher-ups and they repeatedly brushed us off. He made students hate attending his music classes and many dropped band and orchestra as a result. One of the classes he taught was supposed to be Intro to Music Theory. For those who don't know music, this would be a class that should typically teach things like different types of chords, the definition of music symbols, the logic behind key changes, etc. At the first class of the year, there were about 25 kids enrolled. Most of these were music and drama kids who wanted to be teachers or performers in the arts one day. On the first day, he handed us a quiz because he wanted to see how much we knew. I think there were maybe 3 to 5 kids who were able to attempt a single question on the quiz. No one got a single answer right. That's how advanced it was. Imagine signing up for what you think is a basic pre-algebra class and walking into advanced calculus. This teacher spent the entire class period berating us for not being prepared when no one could even attempt his quiz. We told him, "This is an intro class. None of us have learned anything like this before." And his response was, "Really? I thought this was an advanced class." The next class period, there were maybe 15 kids enrolled. He did the same thing. Asked us to perform something we can't even understand, and then berated us for not being prepared. At every class, he would say, "I thought you all were musicians. This is supposed to be an advanced class." By the end of the second week, there were 6 students left enrolled in this class, including myself. He softened up slightly to those of us who stayed and seemed to think we were his prize students and that this was his class of elites. Think Professor Slughorn from Harry Potter. In truth, we all thought he was insane and cruel, but the 6 of us had sufficient music background and experience to understand a fraction of his lessons. Without the bell curve, we all would have failed his class. A few months go by and we are at the end of the first semester. By now, every student connected to music in the school hated this guy, and repeated complaints had done nothing to fix the problem. The admins filed away every complaint, but never did anything more than remind him that he's supposed to be more kind to students. He changes nothing and still berates students and makes them cry. So when it comes to the final exam for his theory class, he decides that he wants to give it to us early so that on the day the final is supposed to be scheduled, we can have a class party instead. Of the 6 of us left, 4 of us have the same period after his class together as well. That class was AP English, and we were prepping for the AP test. We had no problem with the class party and music right before the AP prep exam, so we didn't complain. The day comes of our music final exam, and after we finish the test, he tells us that for our class party, he wants to take us all to breakfast at a new IHOP that opened 20 minutes away. His class was first period. We try to tell him all the issues with this plan. We aren't allowed to leave campus without permission slips. It was a closed campus policy due to an incident where a student who left campus for lunch got hit by a car and was killed. We will not get back in time for second period, which is a final exam. He doesn't have permission to remove us from the campus. What if there is an emergency and we are unaccounted for because we aren't even at the school? His solution was to tell us that after the start of class on our final class day, he would be going to IHOP, and if we wanted to join him, that was our choice. But if we didn't, we would have to stay in the classroom and not bring attention to the next that there was no class and no teacher. Without talking about it to each other, the 6 of us saw an opportunity to finally get the admin's attention to the complete disregard this teacher had for rules and policies. We made sure to inform our English teacher that we might be late to class on the day of the final due to a class field trip for music theory. She was irritated and reminded us that this final was very important and that she would not give us extra time if we came in late. We told her that we understood and gave her details about where we would be and what we would be doing and who we would be with. She said she still expected us to be in her class. On the day of the final, we all went to IHOP. It took forever to get there because of construction, and forever to get our food because the restaurant was newly opened and had a large number of customers. We got back to the school halfway through our second period class. The admins were waiting for us. Security was waiting for us. My English teacher had called the front office to complain that 4 of her best students were missing and that she was fairly certain we weren't even on campus. The admins had checked attendance and seen that we were all marked present that morning, and they had searched the entire school looking for our class. The 4 of us walked into our English final to a livid teacher. We knew she was pissed at us, but couldn't punish us beyond saying we had the same remaining time as the rest of the class, since we had been with a teacher in our absence. None of us did as well in the final as we could have if we had the full 87 minutes, but we were doing well enough in the class already that the lesser marks didn't affect our overall grade too much. The band teacher had a private reprimand that was so loud the entire school could hear it. He was confused as to why the administration was upset that he took minor children off campus without permission or notice, without proper school transportation, or even a good reason. He stayed with his usual attitude, but this time towards the admins. Why are you guys so incompetent about this? They are old enough to drive. What's the problem? The English teacher, who I actually adore and was one of the best teachers I've ever had, absolutely went mama bear on the administration about how they could continue to employ someone who disrespects the other teachers so much as to deprive his students of their final exams and put them in potentially dangerous circumstances. He told us to drive ourselves to the restaurant, and any accidents or medical issues would have been the school's fault. He was fired later that day. Many of the students had a gleeful but confused reaction since the 6 of us weren't talking to anyone about it. All most people knew was that this tyrant of a teacher was gone. We didn't spread the story very much of how it happened because we still feared being reprimanded for our involvement, since he technically have us a choice to go with him or stay, but I always smiled when people gossiped about what the final straw was that got him fired. TLDR. Jerk teacher told us to leave school with him for class party. We complied, and the district fired him. Thieving bully demands I take him home in order to give him my fundraising earnings. I comply, and it works out beautifully for me. I was in middle school in the 90s. I loved growing up then, and even though there were gangs in my area, I generally avoided trouble. One of my classes had this big field trip planned, and they had us selling chocolates to raise money for our trip. I was pretty good at it and was selling at a good rate. I would take the bus, public transportation, to school, and my stop was about 2 blocks from my home. I got off at my stop one day with my box of chocolates, and there was this older kid, around 16 to 17. Pretty big for his age hanging out there. He saw me and came towards me. This guy is clearly a gangbanger. Payaso comes up to me and says, "Hey, homie, where you from?" He was asking what gang I was from. It's not the first time I get challenged like this, so I just reply, "I don't bang, man. I'm just a junior high kid." Payaso looks at my box of chocolates and takes it from me. "What's this?" I tell him it's nothing. It's something for school. He opens the box and sees a bunch of dollars in there. He grabs the bills, around $15, my sales for the day, and takes a bunch of chocolates as well. "Tomorrow you're going to give me $20 more. If you don't, we are going to have a real fucking problem." I walk away feeling scared and pissed off. I realized I'm going to have to pay back the lost money from my birthday money, and I definitely didn't want to give this guy any more money. I think about it and decide I'll get off at a later bus stop from now on and walk a little more just to avoid this guy. The next day, this is what I do. I stuff my box in my backpack just in case, and I exit about 2 stops later. I don't see the guy and think I have solved my problem. Then I get to the liquor store a block away from home, and who do I see but this overgrown idiot Payaso? "Hey man, you didn't forget about me, did you?" I said, "Look man, I don't have any money right now. I don't even have my chocolates. I left them at home." I shouldn't have said that. "Okay, let's go to your house and you're going to give me the money or something else if you don't got it." I begin getting real nervous. My mom is at work and my grandma is home. I definitely don't want to bring him home with her there. I glance at him and notice the tattoos on his arms. At this point, I saw the perfect opportunity for malicious compliance. I tell him, "I don't think that's a good idea. Why don't you just let me go, man?" Payaso grabs me by the collar and says, "I tell you what to do and you fucking do it. You understand?" I nod my head and tell him to follow me. Now it's time to give a little background. My neighbor that lived in the house next to mine was a veterano, a veteran of one of the biggest, most notorious gangs in the city. He was in his 40s and a real chill dude. He loved my grandma because she would often share plates of food she made with him and his wife, and he was fond of me because I taught his 8-year-old boy how to play baseball. His son had a disability, a problem with one of his legs, so most other kids wouldn't play with him, but I often did. Let's call my neighbor OG. OG always had a bunch of guys over at his house. He made sure they never caused problems, and they were all respectful towards my family in particular. Back to Payaso, the tattoos on his arms. I realized he was from the same gang as OG. I have a big smile as I'm walking home, and Payaso asks me, "Why are you smiling, pendejo?" Idiot. I say no reason and keep walking home. As we get closer, I see a bunch of guys hanging out at OG's house. Payaso narrows his eyes, then smiles as he recognizes some of the guys. We get to OG's house, and Payaso says, "Wait here, pendejo, let me talk to my homies." OG is sitting on his porch, and Payaso starts greeting some of the guys, and then heads towards OG and greets him in a reverential manner. OG notices me and says my name. "Hey, OP, what's up?" Payaso turns to look at me, and I say, "Payaso told me to wait here. I have to go home and give him money." OG stands up and says, "Why do you have to give him money?" I say, "Because he told me yesterday at my bus stop that the $15 in chocolates he took from me wasn't enough and I had to give him more today." Payaso begins to speak. "You know this kid OG?" OG gives him the scariest look I've ever seen and tells him to shut the fuck up. OG looks back at me and asks, "Is this from the chocolates you are selling?" I said yes. OG asks me how many chocolates I have left to sell. I say about 50. He tells me not to worry. Payaso is going to pay me for the 50 I have left, plus 20 for the day before, and an extra 50 for my trouble. He tells me to keep whatever else I sell. He tells me to go home, and Payaso would be back later with my money. About an hour later, there's a knock on my door, and Payaso has an envelope and says, "Here's $120, little homie." I fucked up. I'm sorry. "Do you have Nintendo? I brought you some games." I just stood there stunned and thinking how I never would have guessed that getting robbed had so many benefits. I didn't see Payaso too many times after that, but whenever I did, he would wave at me and never bothered me again. CEO didn't understand what my department did, apparently. Update at the bottom. Thanks so much for the upvotes and silver, gold, and platinum. I really didn't think this would take off like this. Some backstory. I was a general troubleshooter for my company. My job involved a lot of traveling to different clients we support. My area of work is Ontario, Canada, where I am based out of, and some of the nearby states in the United States, New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, Pennsylvania. I did most of my traveling by car since my schedule can change quite quickly and flying can become very expensive. I had one colleague who is technically my subordinate, but we have a very good working relationship and would often handle calls independently of each other, only checking in by phone once a week and in person once a month when necessary. A little over a year ago, I get an email calling me to the head office in New York City for a meeting with the CEO and the board of directors regarding my job. I check with my colleague and he got the same email, so we make our travel plans and meet in New York City the following week. We have dinner together the night before our meeting and can't figure out between us what the issue is about. It's rare to get summoned to head office and more rare for things to be so vague. When we go into the meeting the next day, we are informed that the company is dividing our department between the US and Canada, and that there would be a new person to deal with the US clients, and we were to restrict ourselves to Canada. Both my colleague and I were a little shocked at this, since neither of us has even heard this was being discussed. I asked who the new person for the US was, and we then learned that it was a new hire that the CEO had taken a special interest in. Trying to be of good spirit, I offered to train the new person. There are many realities of the job that are not in the job description. CEO accepted and then brought in the new hire. In walks a young lady who looks about 23 years old and wears an expression that she knows everything. She sits at the table and immediately makes it very clear that she wants nothing to do with us. CEO, Bob, new hire, Karen, my colleague, Jim. Bob, welcome Karen. We have just informed OP and Jim about the change in structure, and they are willing to give you the support you need to get yourself started. Karen and Bob both look at me. Me? Glad to have you aboard, Karen. I think both Jim and I have a lot of experience to share with you, and we are happy to do so. Perhaps it would be better in a separate meeting so we don't take the board's time. Karen. Thank you all. I have a lot of ideas about how I can streamline our department, and new policies I can introduce that should save the company a lot of money and expenses. I'm very confused at this point. Karen is speaking as though she is my supervisor, and that is distinctly not what Bob spoke to us about. I can see some of the board members giving strange looks at this as well. Me. Bob, Perhaps I misunderstood the new roles here. Would you please clarify? Bob. Sure, Karen is the new head of your department, and both you and Jim will answer directly to her. Board member. That isn't what we discussed or approved as a board. We weren't fully convinced of dividing the department, but this is completely against what we discussed. Karen. What did you discuss then? Board member. That your department would be divided between the US and Canada. OP and Jim would remain north of the border, and you would run the US. Karen. That's not what I was told, but I can work with that, as long as these two stay out of my way. Indicating me and Jim. Jim and I are both shocked and insulted to be spoken of in this manner. We are both very good at our jobs, and before today have never seen this woman in our lives. Bob. That settles it. OPI, effective immediately. You and Jim are to have nothing to do with Karen. Do not interfere with her work at all. You are both to restrict yourselves to working within Canada only. With that, he ended the meeting and left the room with Karen close behind him. Jim and I sat there stunned for a moment, and some of the board members came up to us to express their shock and sympathies about this. I had enough presence of mind to ask if we would get a written directive of this change, and was assured we would. Sure enough, both Jim and I got emails with the new directive from Bob by the end of the day. So, after sending an email to all our US-based clients advising them of the change and giving them the contact information of Karen, Jim and I made our way back to Toronto and reorganized ourselves for working within Ontario only. This meant much less traveling for us, so it gave us more room to breathe. Within a week, I was getting complaints from our US-based clients that Karen was not answering emails and missing appointments. I forwarded these emails to Karen and copied the entire board, including Bob. Another week later, I get a phone call from Karen, who sounds frantic but will not admit she needs help. She makes pleasant conversation and then asks how I would handle a particular type of situation. I tell her I'm really not interested in discussing work, as that might be seen as interfering in her work. Later that evening, I get a call from Jim, telling me he had the same conversation with Karen and handled it the same way. By the end of that month, I get a call from Bob asking if I will take over the entire department again. I politely tell him no, since I didn't want to interfere with Karen and her role. For the next 3 months, I'm getting emails and phone calls from US clients asking if they can have me back as their contact. This confirms an idea that had been in my head. Jim and I had actually grown our client base in Ontario since restricting ourselves here. So I had lunch with Jim one day and asked him if he wanted to go into businesses with me as partners, starting our own consulting firm. We couldn't provide everything our current company provided, but we could provide a high degree of professionalism for our specific field, and it seemed we had a ready-made client base. By the end of the lunch, he was on board, and we started the necessary steps to get ourselves set up. As soon as we were clear, we both submitted our resignations with explanations of why. The next time clients contacted us, we told them we no longer worked for the company. When they asked if we still worked in the field, we told them we had established our own firm and what services we offered. A month later, we had 60% of our US clients on board, and since the former company had no Canadian support at all, we had 80% of the Canadian clients. Within 2 months, we had 80% of the US and 90% of the Canadian clients. In the year since that time, our new company has grown enough that we have hired 7 new consultants. Jim and I find ourselves doing more office work than road work, and a lot of client courting. Our old company has had to stop offering the in-person troubleshooting, what our department did, and Bob was fired by the board. No idea what happened to Karen. Updates. Because of interest expressed in the comments, I made a phone call to one of the board members I remained on friendly terms with. Here are some answers to questions. How did Karen get the job? Apparently, Bob had set up a business school scholarship out of his own money, which had put something like 6 or 7 students through business school. Karen was the latest graduate, and Bob wanted to give her a start in the business world. Was Bob sleeping with Karen? No clear answer was given, but Bob's wife divorced him shortly after he was fired from the company. Make of that what you will. What happened to Karen? Apparently, she got a job as middle management in a financial services company. Hopefully, she can still build a life for herself and had learned some important lessons. What happened to Bob? Last heard he was a regional director for a large hotel chain. Hopefully, he also lands on his feet. Everyone deserves a chance to make a life for themselves. Some questioned why the board was there for this meeting. I honestly don't know, and neither did the board member I spoke with. It was one of their regularly scheduled meetings, and Bob added things to the agenda. Some questioned my use of non-competes, saying it's not nice. It's a normal reality in the business world. The oddity is that my old company did not have one. The non-compete I have my employees sign is not overly burdensome. It protects our intellectual property and professional contacts. It does not in any way restrict the employee's ability to work in the field. That said, Jim and I have both agreed that if an employee leaves us on good terms and reasonably asked to be released from the non-compete, we would oblige. Some inquired if we are still hiring. Unfortunately, we are not. We are taking a pause from expansion right now as Jim's wife is dealing with cancer. I don't want Jim to worry about the office while taking care of his wife, so we have decided to maintain our size, which I can do with minimal input from Jim, until his wife is in remission and he has a chance to rest and return his attention more fully to our company. Jim and I treat each other like family, so this is a natural step for us. Thank you all so much for your interest and the great feedback and discussion in the comments. Edit. Replaced all the initials with names because a number of people commented the initials made it difficult to follow.